Hello everybody and welcome to another episode of Alex's Afternoon Art Show. Today we are drawing Chun-Li from Street Fighter Alpha, specifically, because that's a very different design and it's an easier one to draw, so who knows, maybe this will be easier than the last time I drew Chun-Li. Wow. But yeah, so our topic today is going to be posing. Simple. That's all we're doing. All we have to talk about is posing. Nothing crazy, no lighting stuff, none of that. Just posing is all we got to talk about. That said, I do have to edit this pose a little bit because there's some problems with it, with the way I've drawn it. You'll see them pretty imminently, but there's some issues which I'll have to fix. Some things are not sitting right. As a matter of fact, one of them is pretty obvious now that I look at it. But yeah, right, okay. Yeah, I'll have some things to fix with this, but we'll get to that. I need to really cover before we just get into it. I don't think there's an enormous amount, realistically speaking. I think there's just a few little elements that are going to need a bit of reworking. But yeah, anyways, I will just roll the intro then, and I will show you what I have. Yeah. Okay, this is what we got. It is absolutely boiling in here, so I'm going to try and keep this brief. So, yeah, right. So, there's one problem which you might notice pretty quickly, and it's this arm. This arm is just a bit too long. I think that's my problem I'm having here, is this arm's too long, because I did a little bit of a measurement with my hands here, and the arm ends like here. I mean, if her hand was outstretched, it'd be ending like here. A pretty long arm. I need to shrink that arm down a little bit, so I'll do that here now. This and just there. Cool. How about that amount? Yeah, well, that works. Get in a little bit. Make some edits to this. But that will work for now. For now, that'll work, I'd say. Let me do another measurement with my hand. On the middle of the thigh, that's a little bit more reasonable. Other arm. That's more normal. The other arm is more of a normal shape. Right, okay. But yeah, posing. Right. So, when it comes to posing, I've talked about this quite a lot. I've talked about posing a lot. It's one of the things that I probably talk about the most because I talk about it in literally every episode in some way, shape, or form. Because I always try to pose the character, interestingly, to make my life, well, not necessarily to make it easier, because it certainly doesn't make it easier, but to give myself something a bit more this. So yeah, when it comes to posing, in a martial arts pose, as with this one, I tried to go with something which sort of kind of looks a bit like one of Chun-Li's sort of poses while she's moving through her animations. This is something which this is, I mean, even if it isn't exactly like one of her actual poses, it's sort of like it. One of the things which I did do in this, which in a way affects the posing, is that I did meddle with the proportions a little bit, because I wanted to try and stick a little closer to these sort of cartoonier designs that a lot of the Street Fighter Alpha characters have. So things like her head is a little bigger than it probably should be, and her hands and feet are a little bit bigger than they probably should be. Feet and hands, not quite so obviously. The head, I think, is quite obviously a bit big. But I am going to be making some edits to that face because the problems that I'm having with it, just not great looking. It's not perfect. A lot of this face just isn't sitting right with me. Her fringe doesn't quite look right. It needs to sort of go further down and be a little bit more spread out. It's a little bit too dense and short. for what I have currently. It should be a little longer. It should be sitting nearer the eye, and it should also, yeah, be going down further and be a little bit more spread out. Because generally speaking, it is a bit more spread out. It's a lot less sort of dense. What I've used here, and I think that's actually appropriate. But yeah, it's much less sort of densely packed hair in that sense. I think I got the buns right though. Those look right. I did, for whatever reason, not give her shoelaces, but I'll do that later. I'll do that towards the end, obviously, of the detailing, because that's where shoes are. I might have to. I think I'm going to make her feet a bit bigger because they do just look a bit small here. I think, especially compared to her legs, because her legs are quite big, but her feet are a bit small. And yeah, the hands I think are fine. They're mostly all right. This arm will have some other changes that I'll have to make to it, just so that it's so weird, because I do think it looks a bit weird even though I shrunk it. But yeah, so right, in terms of posing, there's certain things that need to be addressed, i.e. this thigh is enormous. Why is that? Well, that's because this leg is flexed, because this leg is where all of her weight is going. So this thigh should be flexed, and obviously I tend to emphasize these things a little bit, and also, as I mentioned, we're going with something a little bit more exaggerated because we're going with characters who are more cartoony here. So this thigh is pretty big, and that's just because, again, as I mentioned, this is where all her weight is going. This calf is very flexed, as you can see here. All the muscles sort of bumping out there, as with the thigh. And then this leg is a little bit. It should be slimmer than it is, but it is a bit slimmer than this. I will slim that out probably a bit further, just so that it's more emphasized. But yeah, this leg is a bit slimmer, and it will be slimmer than it is now, to emphasize this fact. As part of this pose, that's sort of a thing. There is kind of an angle here. Well, I mean, there's obviously an angle, you can see it on her face. What I mean is a little bit of perspective is more of the word I was looking for there. Of where this side of her is sort of coming slightly towards the camera. Like, this foot should probably be a little bigger. This leg is bigger than this one, even with the gigantic thigh here. This leg is just generally larger than here. And this arm is larger than this one here. So again, there's a little bit of perspective going on there, and that obviously proposed in obvious ways, i.e. what we see. So with this foot's a little bit bigger, and it's also we're also seeing more of the front of it, meaning that it is sort of facing us a little bit more. Same with well, not quite the same with the hand. The hand is facing out, but the arm itself, the bicep here is bulging towards us, so it looks a little bigger. And these are obviously happen with musculature as this bend, and in fact, even on someone slim, you will still see very clear sort of muscular definition in certain ways, in certain poses. And that's just sort of, again, that's how this stuff works. It's not, again, the end of the world if you don't include this sort of thing. It's just something that adds something. I find, at least, something a lot. But it definitely it does add whenever you use it. I try not to go too overboard with these things, because it can get a little bit overwhelming, especially with what is ostensibly a very simple drawing. It shouldn't be sort of so over detailed in a sense in that way. But granted, this is a simple enough design, so I feel like I am allowing myself to do certain extra details. But as I mentioned, there are some issues here which I will need to correct. Little bits of the face aren't sitting right. The hair, the fringe isn't quite right. This arm is fine. This arm has some problems. This arm will probably find more problems with as I'm going. The shoulders aren't quite right. The shoulder here is way too long. So I might maybe trim down the arm a little bit further as we go, because it is still pretty long. Still sort of the middle of the thigh, so that's pretty long. Even still, so I might trim it in further. We'll see what I do with that. My camera's sitting a little off. But yeah, there's little things like that which I'll have to adjust as I'm going here. Again, the shoulders aren't quite right. This thigh is huge, but that is fine. I'm actually more concerned with this thigh. This thigh is a little too big for the pose that the leg is in here. It shouldn't be that flexed for how straight the leg is. If the leg is that straight, it should look a little bit slimmer. There's no real weight on that leg. Weight is all on more on the calf than on the thigh. So if anything, the thigh should look a little bigger there. But this leg, all the weight is on the thigh and the calf, so they're flexed. But yeah, again, one of the things that some people will do when they're drawing a character is to sort of show how the nature of the pose. What they might do is they might draw a little line like this through the pose, and that will show you the sort of curve of the pose. So i.e. here, this is a sort of smooth curve up like that. Well, I mean, obviously a line I drew is not smooth, but this is a sort of smooth curve, and then all the other lines are also sort of going along with that curve in a sense. Sort of. It's all sort of going like that. Now again, if this was the drawing, I don't think people would watch this thing. Not that an enormous number of them do, but that is besides the point. But yeah, that's the sort of general idea there. That's a thing that some people sometimes do. I don't tend to do that, but it's a thing that some people do, so if you ever see that, that's why. It's just sort of a thing to help you visualize the sort of angles and motion of the pose. It's also a thing that people do sometimes to show off the clarity of a pose. I.e., if you have a pose where you're going to be having like say you've got that same through line there into the leg, but you've also got something else going up like that, and then like this, and then like that. That's still clear, because that is now, even from that you can see, okay, that's one arm down, this whole leg goes down like that, then there's a leg up, then there's an arm like that. So even that is too clear for the point I was trying to make there. What else would be more sort of obvious? So if you had a thing like this, say it was a straight like that, and then you had leg up like that, that's another leg, then you had hand up like that, and then you had a hand out like that. What's going on there? The answer is you've got a leg which is sort of concealing the other leg coming up like this, while one hand is going up and out like that, but it's coming towards, and then another hand which is going out and back like that, or not like that, like sort of the side a little bit. Again, it's a confusing thing, so this is a pose that if you were to draw that out as a detailed drawing, you'd be wasting your time because you'd be losing so much visual clarity, and it would take a lot of work to make that kind of a pose. Well, especially at this angle as well. Like it's not just about the pose here; it's about the angle. This kind of pose you can work with at a better angle, but this isn't it. This angle here ain't it. But that's just a minor point to make about posing, I guess. But just to make sure there's no dots left over there. But yeah, so I've rambled a lot about posing. So I think I might just start and do these details, because as I mentioned, it is really warm in here. So yeah, I'll do these details. Obviously that I'll have some stuff to fix here, so you'll see me doing that. And then I will be back to do the colors. That shouldn't be too challenging. Yeah. Alright, it's now multiple days later. I finished those details, naturally. And so, let me go over some of them. So I made more adjustments to certain things. As I said, it's been a couple of days, so I don't remember everything exactly. But some of them are reasonably obvious, i.e. I pulled in the hand a little bit more. I made the arm a little shorter, a little bit more sort of toned. It's the same with the other arm, I just sort of toned them a little bit more. I sort of, again, I wanted to keep everything seeming toned. I trimmed in this thigh because this leg is outstretched, so obviously the leg should be a little narrower because it's outstretched, it's not flexed so much. This leg is where all the weight is going, so this should be a bit more flexed, a little bit more bulging. Then this calf should then obviously be more bulging up here, whereas this one's a little bit more trim and narrow. So again, these are things that make a bit more sense, I think. I just did those little things with the arms mostly. I changed the face quite a bit. We'll do a comparison here. There. So this is what her face looked like originally, and this is it now. I made her eyes bigger, and I changed the shape of her jaw. That's a little bit more simple, a little bit more subtle. I changed the shape of her jaw a little bit. I had it indent a little bit more, so it's a little bit of a smoother shape as it goes around. I made her fringe more accurate to the art of where it's just a little bit more spread out, a little less dense. Like here, it's very dense, very short. Here, it's a bit longer, but it's a little bit more spread out. So you're seeing a little bit more of the head underneath. And yeah, obviously it sticks out over here, which doesn't really do before. It sort of sticks out much higher up. So yeah, I made those kinds of adjustments. The eyes are kind of the big one with the face, but obviously the eyes are going to be much more noticeable. Her mouth is slightly different in shape, only very, very slightly. It's like the bottom lip is really where the major differences lie. The jaw and the chin are a little bit different. The sort of side of the face here trims in a bit more of a sort of rounded shape. The chin is a little bit more trimmed in because it has it slightly points out at the bottom here, but I sort of trimmed it in and rounded it there. What else was there that I needed to mention? I didn't make huge sweeping changes. Otherwise, it's just sort of, like with the leg, I made the leg a little bit more trimmed in, and I sort of shaped out the rest of the sort of waist and stuff like that a little bit more, just so to move some of the sort of definition around a little bit. I did still trim in this leg a little bit, so that it's a little bit less sort of gigantic, but it's still big. I pretty much completely redid the shape of the shoes. They now have laces, which they didn't have before, and the design of them is a little bit more accurate to the art, more so than the in-game asset, because that's what it was before. As this is more accurate to how the shoes look in-game, and then this is more so what they look like in the art. So I decided to go with this instead because it's better, it looks more interesting. Is there anything else we need to mention? Here's the hands a little bit, like only slightly. They sort of slightly reshaped the hands. This finger is like a little bit. It's got like a very big tip on it, but the rest of the finger is quite thin. So I just sort of evened that out here. Same thing with the other fingers. They just sort of even them out a little bit. But yeah, she's got quite long hands, which is something which I didn't change much from the original sketch that I did. That's just, for whatever reason, the way that I drew it, I made her hands quite long. I don't know why, that's just how I drew it. And I mostly stuck with it. Because I made this shoulder a little slimmer, you can see because this shoulder is now a little bit slimmer, you can see the end of the tie on the bun, which you otherwise wouldn't be able to see. The same thing here, where you can sort of see the tie going around the edge of the bun here. But it's mostly just sort of the test the back there. Yeah. I don't think there's anything else I really need to go over too much with this. I'm not sure what I'm going to do background wise. I think I might just sort of do a clean sort of gradient. I don't want it to be... It should be a gradient of some variety probably, shouldn't it? Because that's usually what I do. I feel like doing anything else would be a little bit more... It would take up probably a little bit too much space, and given that this is more of a posing thing that we're doing here, I feel like we should maybe focus a little. I should focus a little. Background shouldn't really have much going on. Yeah, I feel like... Yeah, I feel like doing too much with the background feels unnecessary. It would probably be a better idea to just sort of keep it simple. So yeah, I'll probably do just some sort of simple enough gradient on that. And then yeah, the colors here, nothing too crazy. I'm gonna probably try and keep these vivid because again, that's sort of what we've got here. But because we're dealing with lots of blue, might have to try and find a color palette that's sort of like a warm, almost warm blue. Weird thing to say, but yeah, because we're gonna want something that'll emphasize the depth of this blue, of this sort of main jumpsuit blue. And something which doesn't wash out all the yellows and gold, that's sort of goldy yellows in here as well. This is the problem with these sorts of color combinations. Is blue and yellow as a color combination goes together quite well. Whenever you're trying to make a color palette out of blues and yellows, the middle point between those two colors is green. And so whenever you start using the greens, they'll start making things look kind of washed out. Especially that particular green, the green that sits dead middle between yellow and blue. Typically, you're going to wind up using one which is a little closer to blue, especially here, given that most of what we're dealing with is blue. It'll sort of wash out a lot of things. It'll wash out the skin tone. It'll wash out a lot of this stuff, which I don't want. So I'll have to have a think about how I'm going to deal with that. Okay. Well, right. I'll do these colors probably. I will do these colors. I'll do these colors and then I'll be back to do shading and stuff like that, to do our painted shading specifically. So, yeah, I think I will do that. I'll have to figure out what I'm going to do with that painted shading, but that's later's problem. Anyways, I'll do the colors and then I'll be back. God, I'm really bumbling my way through this one. Anyways, we'll move on. Alright, that is our colors done. So, yeah, I chose to keep things reasonably vivid. I feel like I want to do something with this background, but I don't know what to do. I feel like I've done something creative enough with the backgrounds on all of these Street Fighter ones, but I really don't know what to do for this one. So, there has to be something that I can do with the background to give me some more room with the color palette to warm this up. Maybe if I intersperse some yellow background, some paint. Maybe I should do the sort of, that's like a Street Fighter 4 isn't what I was thinking. Like, the like inky stuff. That's very much a Street Fighter 4ism. If I was to do like very like kind of bright, colorful ink, that's maybe more of a Street Fighter 6ism. Left with a bit of a predicament here on what to do with the background. I'll have to think of something because I definitely feel like I need to do more than what I've got here because this is not it. I would say we need to do something a bit more creative here. there's definitely room for it. Again, I've done something sort of different for all of the Street Fighter drawings that I've done in the last while. I've always done something different in the background. What was the last one of these I did? The Akuma one? I think it might have been. The Akuma one I obviously did the 10 symbol, and I did all the sort of smoke and everything in the background and all the really, really intense red lighting. Ken, I did the sort of the kind of fire effects and everything in the background, the ink splashes and everything in the background. With Yuri, I did I mean, that wasn't super recent, but with her, I did the sort of sound wave thing in the background. With Sakura, I did the blossoms. There has to be something. I've set a standard now where I kind of have to do something, and I think I need to inject a bit more of a sort of a few warmer colors into here to sort of warm up this color palette a little bit. Alright, I'll have to think about it. But yeah, in terms of our shading, we're not going to do anything too crazy or anything. Obviously, I'll need to use my shading to sort of make some of these things a little bit more natural looking, like the lips are. I need to make them a bit more of a natural color, and that's all in shading. I did apply a little bit of an eyeliner around. Just a very sort of subtle bit of a red eyeliner, because she usually has it, so I decided to put it in. And yeah, things like that. I just sort of, again, I feel like the sort of colors here, they're nice and vibrant, they're nice and simple. There's nothing too crazy I have to do more so than that. I just need to sort of smooth out some of these things with the shading a little bit. I need to sort of get a bit more of a bit more neutral lighting, I think is maybe not too intense of a lighting environment, but enough of just sort of where it kind of makes things look a bit more natural. Again, sort of soften certain elements and apply a bit of depth, because obviously with black color there is depth. Yeah, that's something which I'll have to do. And yeah, I need to think about what to do with that background. The big one is I don't know what to do with the background. I'll need to think about that. I'll figure something out. Anyways, I'll do this painted shading, and then I'll be back to do the detailed shading and the light line and the gradient. Anyways, I'll have to pick a color palette here as well to work with. So yeah, I'll do that. Back then. So yeah. Okay, so that is our painted shading and our background. So I decided to just do the sort of paint streaks thing, sort of follow the movement, sort of oversell the movement a little bit. It enhances the sort of the sort of way that things move here, as you can see. It's sort of, yeah, again, it sort of just moves with the pose of where she's sort of following the hands. This hand's coming up and then this hand's going out, so it's just follows this sort of curve where it's like, yep. This is the sort of arm curve of the range of motion here of the arms, I guess. What we've got going on, and then just work with the colors that we've already got, being dark blue, light blue, and yellow. And then there's also a little bit of white in there just to sort of lighten it up a little bit. Just to sort of intersperse that in there, because whenever a gradient map goes on, that's going to probably become very blue or become very yellow or something or other. It's going to change colors quite a bit that way. So it's just there to sort of get, just if anything, a lighter version of an existing color that we've already got. So now it is time for the detail shade. Oh yeah, something which I should mention is the leggings, because I shaded them very differently than how I shaded everything else. So a lot of this stuff, I'll even note it with the hair, I interspersed a tiny little bit of white just into it, just so that it has this sort of a little bit of sheen to it. Again, that is sort of how hair tends to work, especially darker hair. You tend to get it, like maybe, I mean mine isn't dark, but you do sort of get that with even hair like mine, where you'll see like these little bits of sheen that will sort of work through it like that. Around here you get that little sort of ever so slight sheen. And you tend to get that with a lot of hair like this, and because again our gradient map is going to make things substantially darker, it's nice, it's a wise idea to put in a little highlight like that. I don't often do it, but if only just for time. It's a wise idea to put it in because it just is a good idea to sort of have a highlight there, so that whenever things get darker with the gradient map, there's still a little bit of a highlight working through these things. Same with the top, I put it in here where there's a bit of a highlight moving along the sort of chest and everything like that. It's the same with a little bit of the goldier colors, put a little bit of into the shoes and stuff like that, just a bit of a highlight again, because all of these sorts of things are very high contrast. A gradient map, as I use them at least, are very high contrast, so it's wise to sort of put in these little things now so that it saves us some time later, and it adds in those little extra bits of lighting quality. These things. This isn't a lighting showcase, but it's worth mentioning. But yeah, so the leggings, shaded them very differently. So it's incredibly easy to demonstrate what I did here, because all I did was I changed the layer type. I usually shade these things in a normal layer, whereas I have changed this to be a vivid light layer, because I found that in normal, it's just a bit dull looking. Like, it's fine, it's just a bit dull. I think it looks way more interesting as vivid light. It's much more vivid, because I felt like whenever this shading went on, I mean, granted the color I used for the leggings were a bit dull anyways, so I feel like it's just a bit more vibrant. And again, it sort of accentuates a lot of the things that I already put in. The way that I shaded the legs made them seem very buff. So I think that sort of works anyways. This emphasizes that even further with the sort of I suppose this would be having much more high contrast, where the vivid light makes it makes the colors much. I mean, it just makes them more vivid. But I don't know exactly how it works, but it'll make them closer to the original color, but more like an over vibrant version of the original color. So this is just a lighter. This color normally is almost white. Yeah, it's almost white, and then that mixes with the blue underneath to make a sort of overly vibrant light blue. As such, same with the darks, they become incredibly dark, and so that's what we'll here. This will play very well with light line, this sort of thing. It plays very well with a light line. It doesn't always play very well with detailed shading. See how this looks after I've done the detailed shading. More often than not, if I'm going to do this type of thing, I would probably not use detailed shading. I've specifically gotten a very dark color for my darkest. Okay, so that should work alright with this, but we'll see. It might not necessarily play the best. We'll see. Another thing which I wanted to do here as well, out of curiosity, I might try something a little different with the light line. But our gradient map is probably just going to be... I'm probably going to try and find a place to put the blue and the yellow in there, in the gradient map, where they're not going to... turn any of the other colors into things that I don't want them to be. For example, if I have yellow be the lightest color, this will start turning a bit green, because this is already a sort of a very pale blue, not even pale, it's a very sort of almost seafoam kind of color. It's starting to get more of an oceanic color. So that will then very easily tilt to green. Same with the top and the shoes as well. Those have an almost kind of oceanic. Well, that's the word I'm using for this. But like, yeah, an almost like, yeah, like light ocean color. That's the best I can think of at the moment. My brain isn't cooperating with that thought process at the moment, so that's what I've got. But yeah, so that's what we're kind of working with. I'm gonna try and keep a lot of what we've got going, because I'm liking the shading that we've got going on this. Very natural in a way that isn't boring looking. So yeah, that's can happen very easily. Is natural shading. A lot of people interpret that as overcast, dull day is natural. Now, granted, that is common, not necessarily natural lighting. Natural lighting doesn't have to be boring lighting, that's what I'm saying. Anyways, we'll move on. We'll do this detailed shading, the light line, all that stuff, and I will wrap up. So yeah. Alright, so that is our detailed shading and light line and the first gradient map done. So, as I mentioned before, I wanted to try something a little different with the light line. So, before we get to the gradient map, because that's the obvious thing which I'll have to talk about, because there's not really much to say about the detailed shading other than, you know, I did it and I'm happy with it. And it didn't fight too hard against our weird sort of layer on our vivid light layer on the leggings. That's good. But something which I did with the light line, which you can see maybe the difference of on the two sides, is that I used a softer brush. I used a sort of a brush down here somewhere for this. I used like this brush. This has got a softer edge because the brush I normally use has a hard edge and it's also got a lot of sort of spotty, messy bits in it. So it's not necessarily like a clean edge that you get. There's a roughness to that edge, and I prefer it. It looks a bit more interesting. That's what I tend to go for. However, I decided to use a softer edge here because I want to blend a little bit into the shading we already have. And so that's what it does. It blends a little bit. It's not like super obvious, but whenever the gradient map goes on, it's a little bit more of a blend. It's softer from a difference, and I just want to put that on this side so that there's a little bit more sort of depth to the lighting that way. I don't know. Again, this is not a lighting showcase. I've just decided suddenly to go very far with it for whatever reason. But yeah, our gradient map, I think it's probably best to pull up the colors here to show what I've done, because I've decided to cobble together a gradient map of my own creation, just so that it has a bit of all of our colors in it, plus some of the shading colors, because the shading colors I used were purple and yellow, and I wanted that to use those specifically to keep it a little warmer so that it's not too cold a color palette, because obviously working with a lot of blues, it will start getting a bit colder, the color palette at least. So that is something which I wanted to avoid, because a lot of our tones here, especially the yellows, are going to be a lot more watered down if that is how the color palette goes. It will definitely, well, it'll certainly become a lot more washed out. Anyways, washed down into a greeny color, which isn't what I want. And again, we do still have a little bit of that because again, there's the distance here between this slightly warmer blue and the yellow, where there is still that green there, which is not, I didn't put the green in, that's just, you know, obviously whenever you put blue and green next to each other, or blue and yellow next to each other, there's going to be a little bit of green in between them. Flipping my word a little bit there. But yeah, there's always going to be that little bit of green. And again, there is a greeniness to some of these edges. You can even see it along here. There's sort of a bit of a greeniness in parts of the skin. But I will hope that maybe some of the other gradient maps I put on after this will maybe hide that a little bit more. Because obviously we've only got the one on currently. It's a soft light and I have it kind of low on opacity. It's 60%. So again, I didn't want it to be too crazy high. But as I mentioned before, it was good we put in some of those highlights into the hair and into the body and stuff like this, because the specific highlight areas aren't particularly visible anymore. Because again, this is any of these gradient maps that I tend to do are always very high contrast, because I find that looks a bit more interesting. And so yeah, we can still see some of our highlights, and they're just a little less sort of pale. They're like, for example, the one along the top is very, very hard. I can barely see it almost. I can barely see it down here anyways. It's more visible on the screen in front of me. And some of these are a bit more subtle now in the leggings. So yeah, that's the thing. It's just sort of it's not. It all sort of gets a little bit washed down a little bit, merged together. Because I mean that is sort of what a gradient map does. It brings together your colors a little bit more by using a unified color palette. But yeah, I also actually quite like how that background's come out a bit more now. The white is maybe blending a little bit more because the edges are sort of getting this bluiness to them because of the gradient map. You can even see that there; it's like slightly bluing the edges a little bit, and so they're blending a bit more into the blue of the color that's behind it. So yeah, that's nice. That's working well. I'm happy with that. Now let's start trying a couple of these other gradient maps. Let's get over that. Don't want another soft light. I would say we're going to want luminosity. That'll be a bit duller, and it'll also work a lot more with our purple. So, below, darker below, darker and colder below. I think I want it above this time. I don't normally usually want it above. Make it like 8%. Not as dark, it's a little bit, definitely darker below. Definitely colder below as well. Yeah, I prefer that. It's a little warmer up the top. So let's have a look at another one. I want a color burn, I would say. Now color burn, we're sort of taking some risks here because this will probably start looking, it'll get darker and it will emphasize these, like, again, these sort of bluey, greeny marks that we're going to be getting there. I don't want this to be very subtle. Depending on where you put it, it definitely becomes very different. Under everything it's really dark, and it also, yeah, just these shapes become very hard. Yeah, you can even see the sort of hard green edges here. Very strange. It's doing that. Right, okay, let's put it at the top and put it down to like 5%. Maybe that's a little bit better. So right, let's grab our texture and throw that over the top of everything. That should be. Yeah, this texture works because there's a lot going on this. Don't need too much of a texture for this. This subtle texture is probably plenty here. Turn that to 15%. Good enough on that. Enough to be visible, but not enough to just sort of want it to lighten things up a little bit, emphasize our lighter areas, blend some of our background elements a bit more. Yeah, just a bit of a green hue to a lot of these edges. Again, that is the problem of having yellow and blue in your color palette, is that they're going to form a lot of green if you allow them to. Issue. This is why usually if I've got yellow and green in a color palette, what I tend to do is I tend to focus on one of them. That's usually why in any of the past, in the last time I drew Chun-Li, it was the Street Fighter 6 design. And so in that drawing, what I did was I really focused on the blue, and so it was a very cold color palette. But here, I've tried to not do that, or something which similar would be the last time I drew Wolverine, of where I focused very hard on the yellow. And I substituted the blue for purpley color in the gradient map, so that it formed more of an orange, red, salmon-y color, as the sort of in-between, or so, as opposed to getting green in there. And so it's the same sort of problem that I've here, is that unfortunately those colors exist together in this color palette, and there's not much I can really do to remove one of them. So it's gonna get it. There's gonna be a bit of green in there, and again, I can try as I might mitigate it. It's still gonna be there to a degree, but I think it's fairly subtle in ways that aren't too intrusive, and I don't mind that much. Yeah, I don't mind the tiny little greeniness that there is to some of this. It's not super visible on the screen in front of me here. It's much more visible on the tablet screen. Yeah, too much. Yeah. So, happy with that. This was a fun one. I obviously talked about all the posing stuff in the last opening, the start of it, all the in the preamble for the details, and a little bit after the details I talked about it. And then this suddenly very much became about lighting and shading and stuff like that. So I guess our secondary topic would be posing and lighting, I guess. Which is, I guess it's always good to figure out our topics only a matter of minutes before the end of the video, but pretty frequently that happens. Makes no difference. At the end of the day, got through it, and I have a completed drawing to show for it. So, that's sort of how we operate for the most. Bit slapdash, but I think decent, decent quality at least. So, yeah. I don't think I have anything more to say. I'm happy with it. There's nothing I think I would have really changed. Maybe, yeah, I think I in future I'm going to try and get better base sketches done, because I really ended up extending a lot of the time that I spent on the details with having to mess around with that base sketch quite a bit and polish it up. Because the base sketch that I started with, you'll remember at the start of this video, there were a lot of elements which just or at least aren't as or nowhere near as good as what we got now. At least the face is just way better now. The face was not very good before; it just wasn't right. And it was the same with the arm, like that. This arm here was just not right at all. It was like all the way out here. It was a really long arm before. Even this one is not perfect, but it's definitely better than this. But yeah. Generally speaking, yeah, a way to make a character look a bit slimmer, which is something that I sort of would have done, which I kind of have done here, is to make the legs seem longer. That will make someone seem slimmer and or taller. Is to make their legs longer than their arms. And most people, they generally have slightly longer legs than arms. That is just generally how people are proportioned, more or less. Well, I guess, yeah, it's time to do the outro. So yeah, if you liked the video, do whatever it is that you normally do, whether that be liking or not. I would of course prefer if you liked it, but I can't make you do that, so do whatever you would normally do. If you would like to subscribe, I would be happy about that. You know where the subscribe button is? It's the same deal as liking. You can do it. You should. I would like it, but you don't have to. If you don't know where the subscribe button is, below the video. I didn't have to tell you that. You certainly know where it is. But anyways, and if you have a suggestion for what you'd like to see in the next video, you could leave a comment, slightly worded. Want to do it politely. And yeah, if you choose to watch the next video, I will see you next time. So with all that said, that is us. I will say goodbye. I will leave.